Okay, so here's how to do a basic supply and demand graph. A typical economics question will ask you something along the following. It'll give you a table, and it will contain data about a certain market. In this case, it's the gasoline market. And it has three different columns: the price of a gallon of gasoline, how much consumers will be willing to buy, which in other words is your demand, and how much producers would be willing to sell, or your supply. And these numbers that go into supply and demand are calculated out over time. This is going to be based off of taste in the market, both for consumers and for producers. But when creating supply and demand graphs, you'll always have this data available to you. And the goal of this is to figure out what market equilibrium is. Market equilibrium will be where the supply and the demand graph hits. And it's relatively simple to do. So if you can see here, in the y-axis we have the price column, and on the x-axis we have the quantity. So these numbers on the bottom are in millions of gallons per day, and those prices are the approximate price based off of the statistics. So the first thing that we want to do is graph the demand, and we do that by looking at our price and then what the demand will be at that price. So at $2.25, which is right here, our number is at 60. How much people will be willing to pay, which is 60 million. So we just go over here to 60, and we make a little dot there. At 60, to showcase that would be at 225. Then at 250, we're at 55, so 250, 55 is right here. Then at 50, at 275, 45, at 3, and you can see here it's just going by 5, so it's just a linear curve, like this. So like that. We would then connect those dots like this. And then in economics, we label that line D1 for demand. Demand 1. Your demand line will always run from the upper left to the bottom right every single time, because as price goes up, demand goes down, and it will never not be that way in a true free market. Doesn't make sense otherwise. Now, for supply, we do the exact same thing, except the line is going to go opposite. So I'll make a different color here. So at 225, producers would be willing to sell 30 because they don't want to sell too many of a product at a low price. And you can see here it's also going to go linear as well. At 250, we're at 35, and then it's going to go up like this, like that. We'll connect those lines, and just like the other one, we label it S1 for supply, supply 1. Now, what you do by solving this graph, and you can figure it out literally just by looking at the table itself, but it'll get more complicated. You can figure out right here is your market equilibrium. It's the point where both sides hit, which is at $3 and 45 million gallons. You can also see that right here because your supply and demand are the exact same. The reason why you need to know how to do this is that if you were calculating out your supply and demand over a long rate in a business or investment or whatever you're doing, it's not always going to be this clear that it's at 45.45. It might fall in between a certain price level and you need to figure out by kind of estimating at certain points. This is the most rudimentary economics possible, but you have to know and understand supply and demand graphs in order to get any further in understanding economics.